Do you want to hear some of the very best content repurposing tips shared over the past year of the Content 10X podcast? I've had the pleasure of interviewing so many great guests about their content and repurposing strategies, and I've decided to handpick some of the best moments and share them with you today. Stay tuned to hear my special highlights of 2020 episode.
Welcome to the Content 10X podcast, the show where content creators learn how to harness the power of content repurposing. And now, your host, Amy Woods.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Content 10X podcast. I'm your host, Amy Woods, and in this week's episode, we are taking a look at the very best content repurposing tips and advice over the course of the past year. Now, I'm really enjoying this best of series. In episode 163, I shared the best of LinkedIn content tips and advice and had some wonderful guests like AJ Wilcox, Louise Brogan, and Mark Williams. And then in episode 164, I shared the best video content tips that we've had on the show, and that featured Mike Ganino and Amy Landino. And now in this next installment of my best of podcast episode from 2020, I'm revisiting some of the most useful tips and fascinating content insights that I've had the pleasure of showcasing on the Content 10X podcast this year. And we're not focusing on a specific platform or medium this time, but let's look at overall business advice related to content and the power of repurposing. I'm sure you're going to love it, even if you are an avid listener and you've heard all the podcast episodes. There's nothing better than a trip down memory lane and a refresh of other people's pearls of wisdom. So to kick off this episode, I couldn't think of anything better than to recap how important creating content is when it comes to growing your business. Someone who knows all about this is Mark Wright. You may recognize the name even if you haven't listened to the podcast episode, as he was the winner of the UK Apprentice in 2014, but he's also an award-winning business owner. He's the founder and owner of digital marketing agency Climb Online with his business partner Alan Sugar. He shared with me on the Content 10X podcast his business motivations for creating content, and this was episode 138 of the podcast called Why Content is the Best Tool for Business Growth with Mark Wright.
You only need one person to listen to your content or see your content, and that one connection can change your business and change your life. In the first year I started producing income, and produced content, I increased my income by 5 times.
Wow.
But let's say that one more time in case anyone forgot that. The first year I produced content, I increased my income by 3 times. And that was from more connections, not from the content itself. It's from who it brought into my network, new customers, better suppliers, and more opportunities. And they're the 3 things you need to really grow your business. And I got such a hard time from the directors of my company saying, you spend so much time creating videos, going on podcasts, doing interviews. What has it brought us? And I said, I'm glad you asked. Here's the list of customers from this month, 37 new customers. And the hard thing is when you do content is when you've produced your first few videos, you do your first written work, you go on your first podcast, you don't get anything. So it's really easy to quit, but it comes from a sustained effort of doing it over and over again. And after about 3 or 4 months, guess what? Leads start coming in, suppliers start coming in, and opportunities present themselves. So it's something you've really got to stay at. And I believe if you don't believe in content, your business won't have a future in the next 12 to 18 months.
Mm. And when you so that, I mean, it's incredible the difference when you said, 5 times from creating content. What content did you go all in on at that time when you started? Video or blogging or podcast?
Video.
What was it?
So
Okay.
so statistically, 90% of all online content is going to be video by the end of this year. That is a staggering result. And like many business owners or entrepreneurs, I'm dyslexic. I can't read and write really well at all. And when I go to a website, the first thing I do is search for video content because I don't want to read pages and pages of written content. I want to find a video. So it made sense to produce content that I would like as the user. So I produce weekly and monthly content on my social media, on my company's website about digital marketing, about business, and I do it in just 1 to 3 minute videos, and I put it online on YouTube and stuff like that. And off the back of it, my following has increased, 10 times what it was, and everything else in line with that. It's been really eye-opening. But let's be honest, producing content is tough. It's not easy. It's no walk in the park. It's not a day off. Like we were talking before we started recording about, you have your content days planned on the Friday you just missed because of your boxing accident. I schedule in my content days, and I look in the calendar and I get cold shivers because I know it's the hardest day of my week, where I've really got to be on it all day, 6-7 hours of producing content. It's tough, but what I get off the back of it always pays it off.
Thanks so much to Mark for that incredible interview. Now, that episode was a really insightful look into how creating content can level up your business. To hear it in full, visit content10x.com/138 or check out the episode on your favourite podcast app. Now, this leads me on to another great interview with Melanie Deziel. If you want to create lots of content but have no idea where to start, then this episode is your go-to. Melanie created a fantastic idea generation method that she was generous enough to share with me on the podcast. It's called How to Generate Unlimited Story Ideas with Melanie Deziel, and it's episode 153. So hear what she had to say about her secret weapon for content repurposing.
So the multipliers are like the secret weapon at the end of the book, I think. This is where sort of the real power happens. So a multiplier is a way that you can take one piece of content that worked really well and then sort of adapt or replicate it, repurpose it, to give it more mileage, to find ways to continue to tell that type of story. So, you think of time is one of my favorite multipliers, and I share some others in the book as well, but time allows you to adapt a piece of content to a different time frame. So, one of the processes we talked about before, we talked about, haircut or a recipe. So the recipe might be, here's a 30-minute cheesecake recipe. Okay, here's a 60-minute cheesecake recipe. Here's an overnight cheesecake you can make, right? So by changing the time period, you take, okay, my people like cheesecake recipes. How can I continue to serve that up in new and fresh ways? You can also do, okay, here are some spring cheesecake recipes that have spring ingredients. And here's the summer cheesecake recipes that stand up well to heat outside for a barbecue. So, by thinking about what are the different ways time impacts this piece of content, you can repeat and adapt it in different ways. And so these multipliers, they really are sort of a way to exponentially increase at least the potential content. You may not have to make all of them. They may not all suit you. Maybe the winter cheesecake recipes are just no good. Don't do that one, But it allows you to think, okay, I've got this one thing that worked really well. How else could I approach that same topic, by adapting the time period or applying one of the other multipliers, So yeah. I think this is like the secret weapon. When something works, let's find a way to have it keep working for you.
Yeah, I love that. I've never, really thought about it in that way, in terms of like that time and seasonal and updating and adjusting the content based on time, whatever that is in relation to your business.
Or we even shared before, sort of curating your best, your best blog posts or best, episodes, best videos of the last month, of the last quarter, best videos of 2019, 2018, 2017. You could curate it based on different topics. I mean, there's a lot of ways for you to take something that works and just adapt it based on time. I think it's probably one of the most versatile, multipliers.
I love it. Yeah, that's great. And then what are any other multipliers?
So another one that we talk about in the book is resources. And what that means is oftentimes the content we're creating requires certain things for it to apply to our audience. Maybe they need to have a certain tool or be a certain type of business. So by changing the available resources, it allows us to adapt it further. So coming back, I don't know why the cheesecake recipe thing is working for me. But okay, what if you need a gluten-free cheesecake recipe? Someone needs it to not have gluten, or a cheesecake recipe if you don't have a compression pan, a cheesecake recipe for a convection oven specifically, cheesecake recipe with low sodium. You could no dairy. I don't know that that's going to be very tasty, but looking at these things and saying, what does my audience need to be able to create this recipe, or need to complete this content, to engage with this content? Because it's not just recipes and ingredients. You think about available finances. Maybe I'm recommending those products I think you should try. Well, here's the ones that are under $20. Here's the ones that are $20 to $50. Here's the ones that are $100 plus. It could be, these are the ones if you need an enterprise system, if you have a small team, if you're a solopreneur. There's so many ways to think about those resources that they either need or may not have, and then adapt that piece of content so you're hitting different subsets of that audience more specifically.
Yeah, I love that. And this whole multiplier approach, it's trying to get your brain to look at content on a different, like horizontal or vertical, whichever it is. But we tend to look in it only one way, don't we? Whereas it's actually challenging you to look on a different level, like a different vertical, with all of these different ones, time and resource. Yeah.
I think it's also really helpful for reminding us to niche down. I think a lot of us, we have that inclination to stay broad. We want to sort of appeal to as many people as possible. But there's a lot of instances where creating 5 niche pieces of content is going to be so much more valuable, get you so much more engagement than creating one bigger, piece. So even about the cheesecake recipe, how many people just go looking for any cheesecake recipe? It's always specific. I want a raspberry cheesecake recipe, or a cheesecake recipe with no dairy because my family doesn't do dairy, or people look for specifics. And so if you can provide those specifics by multiplying and adapting, it can actually, again, help you reach more audience and get deeper engagement with that audience.
I absolutely loved Melanie's content multiplier idea. It's a content repurposing dream. But that wasn't the only great tip Melanie shared. She gave so much advice for creating content, so it's definitely worth checking out her interview. You can go to content10x.com/153, or as I mentioned, it's called How to Generate Unlimited Story Ideas with Melanie Deziel, and you can search for that on any podcast app on the Content 10x podcast. Hey, just a little break from this podcast episode to ask you a question. Would you like one single place that you can go to that provides you with everything you need to be able to implement the best practices in content repurposing for your video content, your podcast episodes, and your social media content today? To help you get more value from the content that you create, get more time back, and help you reach more people than you ever thought possible. If so, then you are going to love the Content 10x Toolkit. The toolkit is full of video tutorials, templates, checklists, swipe files, step-by-step guides and more that shows you how to repurpose your content in the best ways possible today. No more Googling, no more figuring it out yourself. We provide you with everything that you need to become a content repurposing pro. If this sounds like something that would interest you, then go check out the Content 10x Toolkit at content10x.com/toolkit. Okay, and back to this week's episode. The next podcast guest I just had to feature on this episode was Mitch Jackson. His approach to creating content is an eye-opener for anyone who thinks that their industry doesn't suit content. So spoiler, Mitch's strategy is proof that creating content can bring great results to any business in any industry. Some context for you now. Mitch is a California trial lawyer who's embraced creating content to reach a worldwide audience. Mitch has as many awards for his social media presence as he does for his long career as a trial lawyer. He's been profiled in best-selling marketing books and dozens of publications and platforms, including Inc., Mashable, and the Wall Street Journal. He runs his own mastermind, and he's published a #1 best-selling book called The Ultimate Guide to Social Media for Business Owners, Professionals, and Entrepreneurs, which was out in 2018. So check out this clip from my conversation with Mitch in episode 144 of the podcast called How Professionals Can Create Great Content for Social Media.
So I've used these 5 steps, you guys, to negotiate multi-million-dollar settlements, to win multi-million-dollar verdicts for my clients, and to create content on social media that's brought in multi-million-dollar cases to my law firm. And the way it works, it's a 5-step process. Most people jump from step 1 to step 5. That's the mistake most people make. You have to have patience, and this is the way it works. The first thing you need to do is you need to state the problem. You need to be clear and concise. And what's the problem here? What's the issue? What's the thing we're trying to fix? You can state the problem in a short story, like we were talking about. You can state the problem in a way where it's unique, it's memorable, it's entertaining. Depending on the subject matter, it has to be appropriately entertaining. But you state the problem. Number 2, agitate the problem. Why is this problem going to interfere, harm, or hurt your audience? Whether it's an audience of 1, whether it's 12 people on my jury, whether it's a live video audience of 1,000, if they don't take a certain action, how is this problem going to get worse for them? Number 3, state a clear and concise solution. Now, when I say state a solution, I'm not saying this is what you need to do. Tell another story. And in that story, short story, incorporate the solution to the problem that you stated in step number 1, that you agitated in step number 2. In step number 3, state the solution. Number 4, show how that solution helps your audience, not the general public, not somebody on the other side of the pond. How can it help your audience, the person sitting across your desk, the person sitting in the front row when you're keynoting an event? And number 5, state a good next step, okay? State exactly what they need to do next. Some people call it a call to action. On social media, I like to look at it as an invitation to stay connected. Hey, if you guys found value in this live video, jump on over to streaming.lawyer. I share content like this each and every week. Sometimes I'm out on a run with my GoPro. Sometimes I'm down at the harbor on my paddleboard. But I'm always here for you. Let's stay connected there. That would be my call to action. Those 5 steps, whether you're in the boardroom, the courtroom, or on social media, I think are the key to connecting and building relationships on social media. And they certainly have been the key to the lawyers and team members in my firm to bringing in new business, not only from California, but from around the world.
Thank you so much to Mitch for that. Now, to hear more about how to create great content for your industry, maybe give that episode a listen. Go to content10x.com/144 or catch it on any podcast app you like to listen to. Mitch's approach to creating content is absolutely fantastic to listen to, but this then brings me on to my final content repurposing tip, and this time it is from Phil Jones. Now, I first met Phil when we both spoke at Upreneur Summit in 2019, and I've been a fan of his content ever since. I interviewed Phil as the UK went into our first lockdown back in April 2020, and he offered some really timely advice on how to use repurposing in a time of crisis, which is still very relevant today. So in this episode, exactly what to say with Phil M. Jones, I asked Phil what's leading his repurposing strategy in the pandemic situation, and here's what he had to say.
It's a decision to decide to deliver no look at me content, and instead to share come with me or I'm with you content. And it's the desire to try and meet an audience where they're at today. And I really believe that this crisis we're in right now has been a wonderful leveler. It certainly has felt that for me, that there is zero hierarchy within this crisis. We are all just in this game together. There are different levels of expertise. There are different problems that need to be solved, but we're all approaching this from the same level. So I'm an expert because I'm on stage and look at the audience and 300 people looking at me. Yet, like, who cares? So what I'm looking to be able to do is to produce things that are timelier and in the moment. One of the things that I'm working on right now is a new podcast and video series that we'll have turned around started it on Monday of this week. By end of next week, we'll be ready to release an entire season's worth of content. And what it is, though, is it's me re-bringing back some content I had in the past, which is called Words with Friends. but I'm re-interviewing a group of my friends, which are people I wanted to talk to through this time anyway, about a specific word, but keeping it very much in line with this current set of circumstances, showcasing other brilliant people with information that typically hasn't shown up from them to their audience because it's been drawn out from me. And my goal is to be useful with my content. If my content isn't useful to somebody else's circumstances at this current moment in time, then I just don't hit send. I don't push the down button, as Brian Fanzo would say.
Yeah.
So I'm looking less about repurposing and more about what I can produce in a day, publish in a day, and then cross-pollinate in the same day.
Yeah.
So, for example, the email that I talked about a short while ago, that is going to my list today, that is going to be on a blog today. That blog is also going to be turned into a series of SlideShare content for LinkedIn. It's also going to be turned into some thumbnail scrolling images for Insta. It's also going to be turned into a series of images for my Facebook page. It's the same content. It's going to go into a swipe up stories campaign for Insta to bring people back through to the blog. And the blog has a CTA in it that is pulling people towards my COVID virtual offerings to help businesses in this current time. So there's method in the madness in some way, but it isn't saying, how do I take the archive footage and repurpose it?
No.
It's how do I leverage the piece of content I'm taking today? And instead of it just being a Facebook post, it's how do I now repurpose that in the next 24 hours?
I really enjoyed Phil's perspective on content repurposing, so I highly recommend checking out the episode. Just go to content10x.com/132. And as always, otherwise, just find the episode on whatever podcast app you like to listen to. Remember, you can get all of these amazing episodes on my website at content10x.com/podcast as well. So you can see an array of every podcast episode we've put out on that page on our website. Now, unfortunately, this brings us to the end of the episode. Thank you so much to all of my podcast guests this year and to everybody who has tuned in as well. Thank you for joining me. I hope this episode has inspired you to go and check out some of the episodes that perhaps you have missed over the last year or even over the last 3 years of the Content 10X podcast. And also, there's plenty more tips and advice on content repurposing in my book. So if you don't have a copy yet, do go grab yourself a copy. It's called Content 10X, More Content, Less Time, Maximum Results, and you can go to content10x.com/book or just search for Content 10X on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Please do follow me on social media. I'm at Content 10X on all of the social media platforms. So all that's left to say is thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that discussion and thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoy the Content 10X podcast, then why not hit that subscribe button on your podcast listening app of choice so that you can get updated when new episodes are released. And I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a review as well. That really makes a difference for the podcast. Also, please do get a copy of my book, Content 10X, More Content, Less Time, Maximum Results. It is the ultimate guide to repurposing every type of content, and it's available on Amazon in Kindle and paperback and also in audiobook as well. And you can head to content10x.com/book to find all the other places that you can get a copy of my book. And if you would like us to do your content repurposing for you, then we offer a fully end-to-end done for you content repurposing service. This is for podcasters and video content creators. We have our Podcast 10X, Video 10X, and also our specific LinkedIn 10X service, helping you to become the leading authority in your industry on LinkedIn. You can find out so much more about our services on our website. And also, please do give me a follow on the social media platforms. I share lots and lots of tips and advice on social media about content repurposing. I'm at Content 10X on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and if you try content10x.com/LinkedIn, you'll find my LinkedIn profile over there as well. All that's left to say is thank you so much for listening to this week's episode, and I'll catch you in the next one.